We're live! Hooray!
Yay!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Time with Katy. Today, I brought some experts so that we can talk about the CircleCI UI, which is almost as easy as it was on my last stream to say CircleCI CLI. Kate, will you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kate. Not to be confused with KT. We will attempt to differentiate. Also enthusiastic, and I am the senior product manager who's been involved in overhauling the UI here with the rest of the team.
Nice. And Emil?
Yeah, and hi everybody. I'm Emil, and I'm product designer at CircleCI, and I was involved in this UI redesign.
Cool. So I brought you on to be the experts. I know that today is sort of our official, unofficial, what do we call it, Kate? The moving day?
Moving day. I like that. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, so today is officially, like, everyone gets moved over to the new UI. And we've definitely seen, we've been getting feedback the whole time. We've been working really hard on this, and we've seen feedback all over, right? In the community forums and on Twitter and, like, I'm sure in customer meetings. And so one of the things that I thought would just be nice to talk about, like, well, some people waited to switch and some people have already been on it. And, like, how did we get here? Like, what starts a process in, like, changes this big?
Ooh, what starts the process? Well, first of all, people were very unhappy with the old UI. There were a lot of comments about how it was never up to date, the pages load really slow. Generally speaking, things kind of looked like it was from 20 years ago. And so there were a lot of negative comments in various sessions, but also just like in our NPS ratings. People would write in and be like, why is your UI so terrible? But I don't think we would have done a full-scale overhaul if not for the underlying technical issues, which is that old UI had been built by so many different teams over so much time, and no one was a central source to really like maintain it and make sure it didn't turn into spaghetti. And so it was absolute spaghetti. So we wanted to make changes to make the old UI better, and it would have been better to do incrementally, but there just wasn't a way. Like, it would take multiple days to change one word in an HTML file because there was a test in some other file, and it was just constant dominoes and constant reliability issues. And so we couldn't move. We couldn't get anything done in that UI anymore. So it sort of left us with no choice except for a full-scale rewrite. And then the combination of the full-scale rewrite necessity along with the comments about the lack of usability in the old UI and how outdated it was sort of came together on this project to just start fresh and start with more reflection of how our users actually work.
Yeah. So, Emil, have you been involved since the beginning, or did you come in like partway? Like, when did you start being like new UI?
I think I've been there for a very long time, maybe not from the initial beginning, but I did some explorations even before we began with the thinking about the redesign. So I can say I was there from the start.
I think that's fair.
That's a really good point. So this project actually extends longer than the time that I've worked at CircleCI. Like, it was decided we needed to do this before I even entered the scene. And Emil, I think you were really working on it since the very roots when they were just starting to collect all the first user feedback. So by the time I rolled in and they said, you're overhauling our UI, Emil already had these beautiful designs of where we could go in our new direction.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely vision to have, right? And I think one of the things that when you get feedback, I get it, nobody really likes change, right? Nobody wants to go use software they use every day and then it looks different. And you're like, great, I guess my Slack notifications come in over here now or whatever. And so I'm curious, we know like even now, right? People say like, oh, this new one doesn't do what I want. Things are different. Where do I find it? But this was driven always from user feedback in the first place, right?
Yeah, totally. Emil, I'll let you fill in some color on this as well.
User feedback? Yeah, like everything was led by user feedback, but also some company goals, because we desperately needed to convert the new code base so that more people can get involved. And the old code base was so messy in such esoteric language that no one actually wanted to contribute to the code base. And today, we can do something in a day or 2 days, and back in a day we needed weeks to do the same amount of work. And that is like internally the biggest advantage of this code base. Yeah. And we are also asking ourselves questions now, like, was it the good approach, like to completely redesign the most used page in the product, or to go incrementally but just changing tiny pieces, which we've seen from other companies? But like in this context, when we are changing the entire code base, we could not like make small iterations on old code base because we need a new one.
That makes sense, because if like you said, it's so difficult to make changes in the old code base, then like how is that a good use of your time? Like that I understand. I've written enough bad code in my life to know that that's a rough way to start. So I think that like when you start on something like this, how do you figure out, like, so we had some user feedback. We did, I think, like official research and surveys, right?
There were comments in official surveys, but I think it's important to note that the team, as we rebuilt this, did close to 100 like qualitative user experience videos with our actual users along the way of building it. Yeah. So there was some research done that developed the initial designs. Again, sitting down with our customers, asking what they do every day. What are your jobs to be done? What are the tasks you're on our UI to accomplish? But then as we built it, we did way more. We really got in deep, and we heard a lot of unhappy feedback along the way, but that was exactly what we needed in order to rebuild it better for the future. So a lot of it was qualitative based, and it was also, there was a lot of quantitative evidence that got pulled in. I know there are some folks who are upset about some features that didn't make it from the old UI into the new UI. We had some features that like 5 people a week were using. And those we obviously didn't rebuild. It's just not. We're a smallish company. We're still a startup. We can't support every single edge use case. And so we did our best to accommodate all of the main use cases. But there was some significant data-driven evidence that some of our features weren't used. So they did get axed.
That's fair. What do you say to? I guess I'll be the user advocate. I'll be Tron. I fight for the user. So is there a chance that although only 5 people used it, for those 5 people, it was like, so like maybe the actual weight of the data wasn't, I don't know what I'm trying to say, I guess, like what if for those 5 people that use it, if it's like critical, what do you say to those folks, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry. It's not like 2020 hasn't been hard enough, right? Like, there's so much change happening in the entire world. I don't want to cause more stress for people. I don't want to cause more like sorrow, and especially, it's one thing to not build a feature because not very many people need it, and it's another thing to take something away that maybe some people did use, and so it's tough. I would say, if it becomes a critical enough mass that like we're seeing, oh my gosh, importing environment variables was a great example of this, actually. Let's make it specific. So we developed a new feature called Context that allows you to share environment variables across projects. And our assumption was contexts are going to replace importing environment variables. Well, it turns out there are some edge cases that contexts don't cover that import environment variables did. And so there was, for some organizations, a necessity to keep that feature. Right now, it's used by, I think, 500 people a month. So in the grand scheme of hundreds of thousands of users, that's not very many, but still 500 people, I don't want to make you sad.
Yeah.
That's really, really tough. So if that number grows and we have enough qualitative evidence or quantitative evidence to rebuild it, then we will bring it back. And we are continuing to listen to our users that way. And if we don't bring it back, start a side startup. Like, you could make that into some money. Let's get a hustle going, That could be fun.
I'm into that. Emil, what do you think about, I think that maybe if it doesn't show up in the data, then maybe there aren't that many people for which it's super important, right? Or maybe we can offer them an alternate workflow of some kind. Do you think, in your opinion, are there features missing, or do we just need to re-educate people around what it looks like in the new UI, new world?
Well, it is a combination of these two, because for some feature that we excluded, we have alternative ways of how to do those jobs. We have orbs, and orbs offer many integrations. So back in the day, you had a nice Slack integration in the UI, and now that integration is done through the orb. So maybe in the future, we can go a step forward and create mini UI for using that orb to make that easier for the people, because people love getting Slack notifications about their builds.
They do. People love getting Slack notifications. I think that's that's my sweeping generalization for today. Is there, I guess this is sort of for both of you. I'm interested, do you have a favorite part of the new UI? Is there something you were like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we have this now. It's going to make my life easier, users' life easier.
Emil, do you want to go first? I could dive in.
Yeah, well, my kind of favorite thing about the new UI is that it works.
That's a good answer.
Great answer.
Yeah. Initially, we struggled between the old UI and new UI because we could not deliver new UI for the entire product at once, but we went step by step, and we started with the most used page in the product. And from that page, we went forward and back. Also, in the beginning, we used the new UI for the pages that we got in new UI, and for pages that we did not have executed in new UI, we used old UI instead. And that experience was far from perfect. And in today's world, we do not have that problem anymore, because we have new UI for everything, and we can say that our product is consistent visually.
Yeah, I really like that. I think one of my favorite things about the new UI is that it's something broad as well, is that the pages load really fast. I think they're twice as fast loading now, which, we're all busy people. We're clicking through a lot of things really quickly in a day. And I think that makes me proud that we were able to speed up that for users. But now I'm thinking of several other things. So I think my second favorite thing about the new UI, or maybe tied for first, is that it's clearer where your eye should go. I think we hear this again and again in our feedback. We had a pop-up poll asking for feedback the entire way along the new UI, and we read every single comment and posted them publicly in a channel, and so everyone could see what folks were saying. And the biggest, most frequent compliment we get on the new UI is it's just clearer. It's just clearer to know what I should look at. The old UI was very convoluted. There was a lot of features. There was a lot of information. There was no hierarchy to the information, so it's not always clear what you're supposed to look at or what's important. I know when I was a new UI or an old UI CircleCI user, when it first like came to my company, I had no idea what to look at. I had no idea what was important. It was just extremely confusing. And I think that what our designers like Emil did really, really well is figure out what the most important elements were and draw your eyes to those very specifically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I on this stream have been doing baby's first CircleCI sort of experiment.
Oh, yeah.
And so I started on the new UI. So I never used the old experience, but I basically just went into the UI, followed one of my GitHub repos. It made the config. It was clear to me what I should be doing, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that like
that's so good to hear. Oh my god, that's great.
I'm a great guinea pig because I can break anything. And those are the kind of people you need in there, right? Like I was able to like get builds passing on a project without really knowing what I was doing. And I think that that's like, yeah, the UI definitely led me where I felt like I needed to go. And I think that it would appear to me that based on the feedback we've been getting, the people who have more questions about, you know, where did environment variables go or something, they're like more advanced, like long-term Circle users, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. The people who like the new UI the most are typically those with the most complicated projects. And there's a big problem that the jobs weren't concentrated within workflows or within pipelines. It was just a big stream of jobs. And for people with 30 jobs in a pipeline, they were like, what fits with what? And how does it go together? And when did this run? And it was massively confusing. However, that version was very well suited to people who had very simple builds and who only had one job in a pipeline and were very used to running it that way. And so there's probably yes, the people who are who dislike the new UI tend to be people who are more experienced, whereas those folks who are coming in fresh, just the new UI is what they know and it's what they love. But also the folks who are experienced users, like within that cohort, the ones that like the new UI are the ones with the more complicated projects. And those who prefer the old UI are those with more simple projects. And that's not a dismissal that we need to solve that problem. You know, the folks who have the more simple projects are important too, and we need to make sure that CircleCI still works for them. We've done a lot of UX tweaks in the last few months to try and make that better. I won't say it's 100% yet, but we have 2 teams who are focused on the growth side of the house now, specifically trying to help our users harness those superpowers faster. And so we have teams who will continue to work on that and make it more simple and better, we hope, for our users.
Yeah. Emil, do you have anything to add there?
I actually do have. Like one important difference between the product structure when we compare old and new UX is that old UX was optimized for projects which contained only jobs. And eventually it was extended to workflows, but it reached out the limit of how that UI can be scaled. And the new UI was designed with pipelines in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, people who heavily use pipelines and who rely on multiple workflows in their pipeline and who have a lot of jobs, they should prefer, I mean, they probably will prefer the new UI when compared with the old one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely like the sample project I was setting up was the most simple. And once I like kind of got it initially building, I would say that like that was the point where I was like, now what? But I think that was fine because I think that like if you get to the first step of like it's part of my pipeline now, like of my larger pipeline, where it's like building and my tests are running, then like I don't know. For me, I'm like I can ask questions now. I can like dig deeper. Like getting started for me is like a really important piece in the developer journey, right? It's like that what do we, I don't know what the right term, time to joy or time to,
Ooh.
it's like the time it takes you to get something set up and like get it running and have it be part of your process.
Time to joy. That is a phrase. Is that like a codified term somewhere that I could look up?
I don't.
Concept, you know?
You know what? Let's say that it's mine.
Okay.
I don't know that for sure.
I'll give you credit. I haven't heard it anywhere else. So Katy original, TM.
Yeah, I'm gonna make my own graphic.
Excellent.
So like it will be like TM every time I say. Pretty good. So I guess in that regard, I'm interested, Emil, were there certain like design principles you brought to this because of problems that it like or issues that the old UI had? Was there something like, I guess I don't know a lot about design. You can tell by everything that I make. But I'm curious, like what kind of like design principles and guidelines sort of go into the process.
Okay, so like when I started with this work and I went to the old UI, I saw that we have a problem with UI, which is information intensive. There is a lot of data there. And like I started thinking about, can we remove some things and not break them at the same time? And like we figured out that we can remove some things, but the most of things that were in old UX were valuable to our customers. So that option was off. So we need to keep the information that we had, but we need to organize that information better. So the information hierarchy was maybe the most important thing, and we needed to ask ourselves question, what is the most important job to be done for people on this page? And we figure out that on every page there are more than one important job that need to be done. So like after so like after information hierarchy, like we needed to make everything have its own importance. We needed to think about size of things and spacing between things.
I guess that makes sense in the way where I did when events were in the world, I went to a lot of them. And when it comes to making like I still do them on the internet, and I guess the principles are the same, is that if I'm like making slides, like I don't fill it with text, right? Because it's like very distracting for folks. And so you try to put on like, I don't like core things that tell people like what's going on here, but like contextual clues more like, I guess. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting practice for us. So little behind the scenes tidbit. We originally started rebuilding the new UI with internationalization built in. And so all of the wording was, I'm going to use the wrong words for this because it's been a while since I've talked about it. But basically, there was no words like in our code. It was all extrapolated out to a separate file so that it could be translated and internationalized and localized for all of our users around the world. So originally, recognizing that this was going to add time burden to everything we developed, we decided to try and use as few words as possible on the page so that we could be burdened as little as possible with it. And so I think, so that didn't last. Eventually we decided like, this is taking way too long. We just got to scrap this for now. And so we built it without that internationalization capability. But I think it was a really cool practice at the beginning to just try and make sure that everything was as intuitive as possible without words, such that our users could figure out where it was going. And then we realized that adding words really does help people here and there. So we went back and labeled a bunch of stuff, but it was a cool way to start.
No, I think that's a good point that I didn't necessarily think of. But we have users across the world, right? So the more cues we have that don't rely on words, the better, the more accessible it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's nice. I like that. One of the other questions that I have is specific to sort of like user feedback. Can you think of a specific experience in the new UI that came like directly from a community person? Because they've been giving us information the whole time. And I want to say that we encourage this. It's amazing to get feedback directly from the people who use the product. It's really helpful. We joke because it can also be overwhelming, right? But like, we want to hear from you. If you want to tweet at us and be like, this doesn't work, great. Then we know it doesn't work. But I'm wondering if you can sort of think of anything that's in there now because of the community.
Oh man, it's like everything. So here's how we built this thing. We initially launched it just as an alternative job page, and all it showed you was the step output. That was it. It was very ugly. It was very basic. We said, here's a new way we might display step output. What do you think? And of course, the comments rolled in. There was one guy who literally wrote like, "What are you, out of your minds?" Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Was it in all caps?
I think it was, if I remember correctly. We can look, and because people were like, "Oh," assuming that it was done and that was all we were going to release. Big lesson learned on having larger, like more aggressive banners saying this isn't done yet. But what we did was we said, what should we build back next? And we allowed people to write in the app right away tell us what they were missing most from the new view. And so we aggregated those comments. As I mentioned, we shared them in that channel every single week. And the next was 100% of the time, it was just the thing that was requested most. And so our entire development journey was influenced by a thing that people requested most. And that was how we rebuilt the new UI. It was just one step at a time. So it's basically like every single feature was requested by our users. But a couple of more specific things, colorization and step output. We initially tried to launch it without that, thinking that it would make the pages load faster, because it does. And so many people requested that. We said, okay, it's not worth the faster page load time. We got to add it back. Artifacts no longer being nested. That was from calling up users who use artifacts and saying, can you show us how you use this? And we watched them go through this extremely nested architecture and open one folder at a time to get to what they were trying to get to.
How I use my operating system every day? Yes.
Pretty much. Yeah. So that directly influenced us completely unnesting artifacts, which was controversial. I seem to remember me and Emil fighting about that one. It doesn't look as pretty. And that was why that ended up that way. Jumping the step output to the bottom, the most recent output, that came directly from user feedback. The cross-project view, I don't know if any of the viewers remember, but we tried to launch the new UI to everyone in April, and there was a huge outcry saying it's not ready yet, it's not ready yet. And the number one thing that people were upset about was we need the cross-project view. And we had overlooked that. That was an example of the time when the data didn't tell the whole story, because the data would have told us that not that many people were into that. But then qualitatively we saw, no, this is a thing that people don't realize they're using, or like they don't know they need it until it's gone.
Right.
So we went back and we observed people's workflows, how they work with the feed, and we said, yes, we do need the cross-project view. And so we somehow managed to convince 3 separate engineering teams at CircleCI to come together and help us ship that. So we still have some complaints now. We still have people saying, but what about, import environment variables is a great example. But I think it's important to note that like, we are listening. We are 100% listening. Every single thing we've built so far has been driven by the comments we've gotten, by the user feedback we've gotten. And every single time we try and build it back just a little bit more than the old UI had it. But Emil, did I miss anything? Are there any other big ones that we changed heavily due to user feedback?
I don't think you missed anything. And for me personally, it's so hard to distinguish what features came from us and which came from customers. I cannot make that distinction at all.
because all of it was coming from
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. They all came by the customers, but we were there just to think through about how to execute them and make them look and work good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from a baby Einstein perspective over here, it sounds like the easiest way to like make a new experience is to do it based off of what people are asking for. I'm curious, Emil, when Kate mentioned that you sort of went back and forth on this, like abstracting things out, unnesting them. How do you find the balance between things that like look nice or are usable and fit with how people actually use it? Like, do sometimes you just have to say like, well, this is ugly, but this is it, or do you find creative ways to make it still work?
Yeah, I think the good quality in that department is that you know your own limitations and like looking at your design and knowing that it is not good enough is the key thing. And like there were many times when I had a request to do something which I did not want to do, because I thought it's a bad user experience. And I deliberately do it in a way that it's going to look bad. To try to fight like with the team, but eventually I need to do it the right way. And like after I get the feedback from the team with a bad design, and after I get the feedback that the team still wants to proceed with that, I know it's the time to do the honest best shot.
That makes sense. Kate, do you have anything to add, or are you just filled with joy?
Filled with joy. Yeah, I think that does speak volumes, though, is that like if we're united that we need to do it, even if it doesn't look good, then we know it's truly like something the users need. So. Yeah, and I don't think we've ever shipped something that wasn't as beautiful as we could make it within a limited scope. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because these design principles are they're not exactly the same as like, other. I don't know, like it is human-centered design, right? I think maybe that's the phrase I'm looking for, is that you have to account for how people interact with it, where maybe other types of design, not as much. I mean, types of design outside of the computer, interior design, etc. That's a bad example. You interact with your house all the time. Maybe it's always true. Just making things up.
Oh, there's user experience in everything. Yeah, I think that's a big change that we've seen in the last 10 years is like the focus on user experience, just in everything that we build and everything that we push. Like being pretty is not something that's good enough for our design anymore. So yeah.
So maybe human-centered design is putting the human experience first ahead of the like aesthetic design.
Yeah, absolutely.
Emil, do you agree? You looked like you were having a thought.
Yeah, I agree. But in order like to design to be good, it needs to work good and look good at the same time. So I would consider my personal failure if something works and looks bad.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's your job as the designer to find that balance, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I guess that's why Kate and I aren't designers.
Very true. Very, very true. But I think that also kind of speaks to, this is a bit of a tangent, but that sort of speaks to like how our team operated like as a true team. Like I think there are like technical teams out there in the world that are very siloed. Like the product manager writes some bullet points and then they pass it to the designer, and the designer like throws a design over a wall to the engineers who build it. And that was not how our team worked. Like from the very beginning, we wanted to be what we call the three-legged stool. So that's like Marty Kaganism, if you've heard of him. He's like the product management, like wrote books about it kind of guy. And he talks about how good teams are a three-legged stool. where the product's got to be there, the design's got to be there, and engineering has to be involved in the conversation so that you're constantly negotiating. There's a very natural push and pull between like, you know, myself as a product manager trying to get out the user functionality as quickly as possible, the engineering team trying to build it so that we don't have to rebuild it in 2 months, and Emil trying to design something that is going to look good and be pleasing and satisfy the requirements for our users. And so there's just a very natural constant push and pull, and that's been present throughout this entire project to shape the new UI.
When you say it like that, it sounds hard.
There were days, you know, I think as a product person, every once in a while, you really wish you were just in charge. But that's sort of the nature of product, is that you're not. Like, you're nobody's manager. It has to be collaborative at all times. And that's really what creates the best product, is that conversation, is the natural tension, is the constant push and pull and push and pull. And sometimes, you know, we pull too hard and sometimes we push too hard. And then it eventually always evens out, though, and comes back to center.
Yeah, I find that there are definitely times in my day-to-day work where you like push really hard. You're like, why will no one just listen to me about this? Just put me in charge. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, thank God nobody listened to me. That was very wrong.
I've been in that position many times.
Yeah, I think it's important to have feedback, and the more places we can get that feedback, the better. I had never heard the phrase the three-legged stool. I'm sure everybody else knows about it, but it makes me laugh, and I like that about it.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Would you, I guess, so another question I have is like, so basically we started out knowing we had to improve this experience, but would you say that like, do you start out with a goal, like with this new experience, users will feel this way or their experience will change in a way? Like, did you have a really like a concrete idea of what you really like at the core wanted from this change?
Yeah, totally. So it's really hard to write a single job to be done for CircleCI because people use it like in different roles and they use it in different capacities, and it's hard to narrow it down. But we could sometimes write a single job for a single page. So we started with the job page. And in all of our initial user experience interviews, we always ask, like, what are you here to do? What did you come here for? What brought you to this page? And what are you trying to do before you leave? And the thing that people said is like, something broke, got to figure out what broke and why so that I can go fix it. And so our goal for the job page from the very beginning was, does this help you fix your error faster? That was the most, if we did nothing else, that would be the thing that we really, really wanted to do. And so we had a Hotjar poll. We tried to figure out different ways to measure it, like they spend less time on the page or less clicks on the page, but those are really, really not, it turns out, helpful so differently. So we just went with a Hotjar poll saying, did this help you solve your error faster than you could have on the old UI? And those numbers were up and down depending on what we were pushing out that week, but did eventually trend higher. And so that was what we were aiming for the whole time, is like, we get it. You're on CircleCI to solve a problem, and we want to make sure we're making that problem even more apparent. And there's more work coming down the pipeline from that. Not from this team specifically, but from one of the growth teams. They have this, I don't know if you've seen the auto config, like it automatically helps you write your config. So their hope is to expand that to other parts of the project or the product. And then if they detect that you're having trouble with like tests or parallelization or whatever it is that you're working on, they're hoping to help you solve that by just click a button and we'll do it for you in the future.
I could use that button.
I know, right?
I used
other parts of my life.
It was like ages ago. It was like Staples or Office Max. They had commercials, and it was like, hit the easy button. Like if there was like an easy, like an autopilot mode, that would be what I would choose all the time. Yeah. And then Emil, you could design the crap out of it, because I would just be like, just go. I really like the auto config that's in there. I used that for my first project. And expecting to have to write the YAML file and was just like, I'm always excited not to write YAML. So, yeah, I really liked it. And it automatically included an orb, which I thought was nice for me because I didn't know, or it wouldn't have occurred to me that I had an orb use case probably until after I had written the config and then been like, is there an easier way to do this? So that was, I really liked that portion of it because I was like, oh, hey, look, I'm using an orb. And then I sort of I did my next stream on like, orb, huh? What's that? There's like, you know, opportunities for discovery there.
Yeah, totally. I'm a big fan of that project. I think they did a really good job designing it, and I'm excited to see what they can do with it next.
So, Emil, would you agree that from the design standpoint, the mission is the same, like help people identify problems faster?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like initially, when we released new UI, it worked pretty much similar things as the old UI, but it did something important, and it set up the foundation for delivering more and delivering new value for customers in the future. Because today, when we are officially going to move everything to the new UI, we have space for extending things and adding new features that never existed in the old UX. We can provide more information about how people use resources in their builds and give them recommendations on how to improve the speed or success of their builds. And we never could that in the past.
Yeah, and so I think, or I wonder, I guess, this is maybe more of a design question. Does this all lead towards a more self-checkout kind of experience? Like, should people be able to work with CircleCI without having to talk to us if they don't want to?
I'm honestly not sure. It depends on what level of complexity you're working on and on which scale.
Yeah.
Like if you're, I think like for first-time users, if you're just starting out, we have onboarding process with that auto magic or autocomplete, where you don't have to write your own configuration file, but you can click on a button and have a random build. So you can onboard as a first-time user way easier than ever before.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you're having project with multiple workloads, a lot of jobs, parallelization, advanced features, you would need to consult docs a lot and talk to us.
Yeah, I think that seems to be like true regardless of places I've worked, right? It's like there are some people who always know that they're going to have to contact like the engineering product, et cetera, because their setups are like special and weird and delightful, just depending on your perspective, I suppose. I'm curious if like, Kate, maybe this is a good question for you. Do you have a good sense of like in the users that we talk to, are like the majority of our users like special, like are their setups like complicated and I don't mean special. I don't know why I said special. Like are they the kind of users who have these complex setups that require them to like ask for advice, or do you find like a majority of users are like, I know what I need, I know how to do it myself?
Yeah, for starters, all of our users.
Yeah, obviously,
are
that's what I meant.
Yeah, of course. So it's something like 50%. I want to say 56, but I think it's somewhere around 50% of our users have one job in one workflow in one pipeline. So they're very, very simple. And then I think it's an additional like 30% that only have two jobs in a workflow. And it's pretty high. It's very much skewed towards the more simple builds. But it depends on how you break it down. If you look at our users who are paying, they tend to have more jobs. They tend to have
Right.
more projects. They tend to have more complex workflows. And so it kind of depends on how you break it down. For those users who need the more complex workflows, it's very likely at that point that you have a larger team, you have more resources, and our support plans can help you to get those configured. I think Silver support does not offer a configure view, but Gold support, if memory serves, does offer a configure view. So you can work with a veritable expert who will help you figure out how to have the most efficient workflow for your needs. And so highly advise if you're part of the cohort that has more complex workflows, that you get in touch with us about that support plan so we can help you straighten things out.
Yeah, hey, we're here to help, right?
Yeah, totally.
Emil, I have a question just as like a personal preference. When you work in design, do you sort of really do you prefer getting to do like a massive overhaul like this, or it feels like there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's also a ton of work? Is this something where you're like, yeah, let me dig into this? It's so fun.
Well, you don't have a lot of chances to do the full overhaul every day, and it's very exciting. And also, you need to keep in mind that it's a marathon; it's not a sprint. When you want to change everything. And regarding my personal preference, I enjoy both things. And I think I enjoy the most where I see how product changes over time and how the thinking and work reflects on the UI and the value that we provide.
Yeah. So this is a question for both of you. Is there something that you wish you could have or would have done differently in this process? Kate's like, everything.
Sorry, I think I froze for a second. Should I dive in on that one? Cool. So the thing I think we did right is that we rolled it out to our users as soon as possible and started collecting that feedback and listening to that feedback and shipping according to that feedback as soon as possible. The other thing I think we did right is work very agilely. And so we agilely.
Agilely.
In an agile manner. I don't know, agile. And so we were constantly always shipping and improving and incrementing. And I think that I don't ever want to work on a project that isn't doing it that way. I think what we did wrong and what we could have done differently is that we should have made it more apparent that the new UI wasn't done along the way, because I think we lost some trust from our users who checked out the new UI but didn't really get that we were still going to add more. And then they were like, what are you thinking? And I think we should have just been way more obvious, way more clear. This is not done yet. We are iterating based on your feedback. Vote here on what we should add back next. Just over communicating better that it wasn't done yet, so that when we finally did say it is done, people believed us a little bit more. I think that would have helped quite a lot. I also think we, up until last fall, were allowing people to opt in by choice. Like whoever found the banner would opt in. That was it.
And the banner was available for everyone. Is that true?
It started out just for our beta users, which is a group of about 5,000 users. Okay. And you can sign up for that on your user settings page if you're interested for the future. But then we rolled it out to everyone. Anyone could opt in. But we got a little too excited. We had an OKR to get more folks onto the new UI and sort of rush development. And so we pushed some folks over who didn't opt into the new UI. We sent them in and they could opt out, and many of them did. But I think that was too soon. I don't think we should have bumped people over that soon because, again, the new UI wasn't done. All the functionality wasn't there. And a lot of folks were confused why they were seeing this. Why are you sending us here? And we were like, give us feedback. And they were like, what are you doing? And so I think lessons learned, be more obvious it's not done yet. Be more obvious that you're allowing people to be there to give you feedback, that you are listening to the feedback, and don't force people over until you're really, really ready.
Yeah. Emil?
I agree with Kate, and I also think like the biggest problem was that we could not deliver everything at once.
It's what people want, right? Like,
yeah, and I have maybe a personal story about my Achilles heel in the entire process, and I always call parallelism my Achilles heel. So parallelism, when you use a magic, which CircleCI offers, to automatically parallelize your jobs, and that means that they're going to run way faster. And there are not a lot of users who use this feature, but the ones who use it are very valuable to the CircleCI. And unfortunately, they don't have a loud voice because there's not a lot of them. And like when I did the redesign, I did the best that I could. And I reviewed that design with the team, like not just with the X team and design team, but product team as well. And we went back and forth on that several times. And eventually, when we were happy, we delivered that to customers, but we did not get a lot of feedback on that. But when we speak with customers unrelated to parallelism, we discover that people still want some improvements. And that's something I think I could do. I can do a lot better in the future.
yeah, I think that's very right. It's a massive learning experience for everybody, right? Kate's frozen, but I think she agrees. Oh, no, she's back.
Oh gosh, yeah, sorry. I was agreeing. Thumbs up.
You were making a really good face, which is how I always want to be frozen.
Truly ideal. Yep. Looking forward to the recording of this video. Excellent.
Yeah, who doesn't love just watching their own face, for an hour? I think that's like this is off topic, but this stream is for me, so it's fine. One of the hardest parts about a lot of like Zoom calls and things is that you see your own face all day long in the little camera. And it's rough. I don't think I've ever looked at my own face this much.
It is so rough.
It's a lot, Okay, so one of the sort of last questions I have is one, I mean, if you have any just like overarching thoughts you want to share with the community about like going forward, but also just what do you see, like what is the future of the UI? Like where does today is the moving day, and then what do we hope for in the near future? And both of you please answer, and whoever wants to go first.
Well, in UI terms, I think the future is the polishing work and making the UI consistent across different product sections, and creating space for extending and providing more value and new value to customers.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want people to know about using the UI or giving feedback, or just an overall thought now that it's like out there in the world?
It's out there, use it.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that as well. Just looking forward to more polishing. I think what I'm looking forward to most is that I'll be vain for a moment here. I think we were one of the first teams to really embrace an incremental approach at CircleCI. And just the way that we released things was not something that CircleCI had done before. And it worked well for us. It worked well for us to constantly be in touch with our users, to constantly get that feedback and continue to iterate along the way. So what I'm excited about is to continue that. We now have 2 growth teams and soon to be a 3rd. And the mission of those teams is not to build new superpowers for our users, but really to help our users find the current superpowers or install them faster, like that, click a button and we'll change your resource class, that kind of thing. And I'm excited about that. I think there's a bunch of experiments we can run to help our users over and over again, which will really benefit them. And we're going to measure the impact of every single one. And if it doesn't help our users, if they're not getting things done faster, we're going to cut them. So I'm excited for that future. I think that'll be cool to be a part of.
Are there any resources right now for folks who maybe are in the new experience for the first time today? Are there resources they can go look at to if they're missing something, if it's not clear? Docs?
Well, hopefully we did a good job of making it intuitive. But yeah,
I hope so too.
Yeah, definitely the docs are a great place to check. The number one thing I think that people get confused about in the new UI is that it incorporates this new pipelines element, which is a reflection of how our API has changed. It's a reflection of how we're accommodating those more complex builds that are happening throughout the system. But a lot of people are like, a pipeline, what's a pipeline? Is it like a workflow, but not? And a pipeline is like the envelope that happens around everything that runs when you ship a new commit. And so it's all the jobs and all of the workflows, all of the tests, all of the parallelization, like everything that runs when you have a new commit. And so definitely, I think number one resource would be the docs page on pipelines so that you can get more familiar with that as a concept.
Yeah,
talks are a great resource. These community events that Katy is hosting is a great resource. We have a YouTube channel. You can check that out. And if you're new to CircleCI, we now have CircleCI Academy, which is super, super cool. And so if you want to deep dive on the one-on-one, that's the way to go.
All excellent resources. Okay, I put up a little thing. These are the places that you can contact us. Here's our Twitter handle at CircleCI and the community forum, which is a really great place to talk to all of us about feedback you have. Of course, you can give us feedback wherever you are out there on the internet, but it does help us to have it consolidated and have lengthier discussions about what it is you need and you're looking for. So feel free to come talk to us in these spaces because we're doing this because we like you. We want to talk to you. Your feedback is obviously was the driving force behind this change. And if you feel that you weren't heard in the process, now is a really good time to let us know. And like we've said a bunch of times, there will be polishing. There's still feedback and improvements to be made. And if you tell us what they are, then we'll get there all the quicker, which is exactly what we're going for. I want to thank Kate and Emil for joining me today. Your expertise has been invaluable.
Thank you so much, Katy, for having us. It was a fun conversation. So I'm very grateful you put this together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so that's all for us today. Again, you can find us anytime on Twitter or on the community forum. And as always, take care of yourselves, wash your hands, and we will see you on the internet. Bye.